My friends at Easy Cater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Hello, I'm Monique Helstrom, and today's leadership quote is from Henry Ford. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become irreplaceable, game-changing leader assistants.
Please review on iTunes. You're listening to episode 16.
After serving for nearly a decade as Chief of Simon Sinek, New York Times bestselling author and TED celebrity, Monique Helstrom has had unparalleled opportunities, unique experiences, and perspective shifts. With the tools she's accumulated in her own successful career as the primary support person for one of the most influential thought leaders of our time, Monique helps people decipher and disentangle the common yet rarely discussed issues plaguing this indispensable partnership. Monique helps both executives and assistants build confidence within their relationship by focusing on their innate strengths and natural abilities. In addition to speaking and training, Monique offers her organizational experience to new businesses and startups looking to grow and evolve. I'm very excited to have Monique on today's episode. We have a great conversation. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Leader Assistant podcast. Today I have a special guest, Monique Helstrom. Monique, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
So let's talk a little bit, go back in time a little bit and talk about your very first job, maybe your first, where you had to pay taxes job.
That's funny because I actually wrote on there, was it my first job, like working with my father in construction, which I started when I was somewhere between the ages of 6 and 8. My father built houses, so during weekends and nights and summers, we always worked with him and did lots of manual labor. But I think my first job, I was a bagger at a grocery store in Philadelphia, and I actually lied to make myself older because I really wanted a job. I knew, even at the age of 13, I knew I had to save for college, so I lied and told them that I was 15, which was the legal age to work, so that I could start making wages. So that tells you anything about me. But yeah, I was a bagger in a grocery store.
So what did you learn from that role, maybe from how you got the role that you applied in your career?
It was a very service-oriented job, and I was very young, so I was lucky enough to understand the value of living and working in service to others, and just something small and what seemingly could feel meaningless to you might change someone's day. So I always really tried to specifically watch the customer, see what their needs were, and see if there was any just little thing that I could do to help brighten their day. Definitely was the start of my service career.
So when did you become an assistant and why?
Well, I became an assistant. I've always had some sort of logistically minded job. The official time of when I became an EA is questionable because my first big job as an event planner, I was sort of assisting the director of the department, where I was kind of helping her out. Now, my title didn't say as much, but that's pretty much what I was doing. Then I went on to owning my own company. I was a professional organizer, and that's actually where I met Simon. And so officially my first executive assistant job was in 2011 with him, where I actually had the title. But I started off, as I said, as an event planner, assisting the director of the department in Tourism and Hospitality Association.
So was there, when you were doing that, and you said that's how you met Simon, did you run an event for him or something?
I did, yeah. This was way back in 2007, I want to say, or 2008. I was both running the professional organizing company, as well as planning some events on the side, just because I knew how to do it. And I had a girlfriend of mine who was in need of some help with planning some events. And I met Simon. He was on, speech number 6 or something like that. He had really just started out there publicly speaking. And so I was the event planner and he was the speaker. And I loved what he had to say. I loved his movement. I loved his vision of the world. I loved the world that he was trying to build. And so after the event, we started talking and, I told him I'm in your tribe. I don't even know what that means, but I'm a part of your tribe. And we just became very good friends for years and years and years. Whenever he would come into LA, we would hang out, or if I went back to Philadelphia, I'd go up to New York. And, his celebritydom was growing and his experience was growing, as was mine. And so back in 2011, when I did eventually move back to Philadelphia from Los Angeles, him and I connected on a project. And actually, I was moving him, since I ended up organizing a moving company. I was actually moving him from one location to another in New York, which I don't recommend that anyone do ever. I think if you live in New York, you have to stay in the same apartment, because moving is an atrocious thing to do. But yeah, I moved him. And so by the end of the first day, he sort of looked at me as like I had 4 heads and asked me if I was always like this. And I said, what do you mean? And he was like, all organized and I think I had color-coded Post-it notes with me or something really just bizarro. And he hired me that day and said he wanted me to help him organize his whole life. So that's how I got started.
So did you ever, during your career doing event planning and all that kind of stuff, did you ever envision having this sort of chief of staff, executive assistant role?
I did. I was always logistically oriented and always in a role where I felt that I could build something. And so in every position that I've ever had, and I'm a rarity in that I haven't had that many jobs. I've mostly stayed at all of my positions for, I think the shortest time I've ever spent at a job was 5 years. So I tend to stay for a long period of time. And as we grow up, it's not a profession that is widely known. It's not like going through college. There was a specific wing that I could take to be the best executive assistant possible. As you all know, there's not a whole lot of education out there. But once I learned about it, I knew I was always going to fit in that spot pretty nicely, just because that's where my strength set lies. And I always thought it was such a cool job. So I was really excited when I got the opportunity.
So what's the number one struggle you had as an assistant?
I would probably say it had a lot to do with me and my worthiness, my value. I had for a long time felt very bad that I wasn't at the center of the decision-making process, that I wasn't the Wizard of Oz. I was only Oscar Driggs behind the curtain. And that took a toll on me. And I think I looked up to those in the visionary position, in the strategic position, in an executive position. And I sort of envied what they had. They had this power that I didn't have, or they had this way of words that I didn't have. And I always sort of felt like I was second best. And so for my first few years in this career working with Simon, I think that's what plagued me more than anything, was my own value and what I thought I was worth. And once I really got to understand what my value actually was and how nothing in that association got done without me, and like most executive assistants or just assistants in general, nothing in their office gets done without them. It really changed my viewpoint and changed my perspective on really what my skills were worth and how I could help the larger organization.
You struggled with your value, you said. So was part of that the maybe dehumanizing interactions that you might have had with people who also kind of had this, put people like Simon Sinek on a pedestal, or the visionaries are the ones that are important? And, did people try to get close to you just to get close to Simon? And did that play a part of your, personal struggle with kind of where you placed your value?
It didn't necessarily affect the bringing up of my struggles and my issues with value. I think I've had those since I was young, as most people do. And for the first couple of years within the organization, I certainly struggled with it. I think the dehumanizing or devaluing from the external sources was just icing on that cake, really. Certainly people tried to get close to Simon by getting close to me. It happened more times than I care to talk about. But, when you're in a position of feeling devalued as it is, and then when that sort of incident happens, it definitely can affect you and bring, sadness and what am I worth and all of those sorts of things. I think once I realized what my own value was, having those sort of interactions changed a lot. And I mostly used humor, and I mostly understood that it wasn't necessarily had anything to do with me whatsoever, that it really had to do with them and who they were and what they were going through at the moment, and their need or want to get through to someone else. So I tended to, again, I use humor, or I would just ask them, why did you do that? Why did you go through me? What is it that you really need? And just try to help them actually get what they need to survive, as opposed to blocking them, because they treated me in such a way.
Mm-hmm. So if there are assistants, which I'm sure there are, I know this is common, I've experienced it before as well, but if there are assistants listening who kind of deal with that issue of everybody wants to, comes up to me and says, hey, how's it going? And then the next 10 questions are about, their boss and how their boss is doing. What would you say to assistants that are struggling with those types of interactions?
Well, I mean, it's human nature, right? I would first say, people have to understand that it's human nature. And for someone to want to access, if you wanted to access someone, you would find any means necessary in order to access them. That's one of the things that assistants do. We are the spies that go and try to find a way to find that magical person that our boss wants us to talk to. So I always kind of kept that in my head, thinking, well, that's something in a way that I do. I would never go about it in that manner necessarily, but I certainly go by any means necessary to get the job done. So first and foremost, I would say just understand that this is slightly human nature, and it might not be a malicious intent. I always try and find the best about people and not expect the worst. But then I would say, communication, that's my real soapbox, is how people speak to one another and the communication behind it. And I personally would just say, this is how I feel. I feel as if you're trying to get through me in order to get through my CEO. Is that actually the case? Because if it is, then I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. So please let me know what you're actually looking for. Like, cut through the chase. Actually ask the question that you want to know, and then move forward.
That's great. So do you have any crazy stories or times when you saved the day, or maybe both, from your career as an assistant?
I think we all have those experiences of some crazy days where you just never thought anything was going to get done, and then how you saved the day. I think assistants on a regular basis save the day every single day. I mean, there is little innocuous things that you catch. The address isn't in the calendar, or the flight time isn't in there. And those teeny weeny little wins actually are very life-changing and very day-saving for your executive. So I think, the more we can pat ourselves on the back and say we do these things every day, but I certainly have crazy stories of fans and people bum rushing the stage to try and get to Simon and having to walk through security to get out. That actually happened in Sweden, which was very interesting. Somebody rushed the stage to presumably tackle him. I'm not entirely sure what was happening. But there's lots of fun stories about fans and things that they did to get close to him that are funny and strange all at the same time.
So did you ever have to physically tackle somebody?
Not yet, but I definitely did used to use the title that I was both his executive assistant or chief of Simon and / bodyguard. There were certainly a lot of interesting fans who would wait in line to have, Simon sign their book or whatever, and would bring various items from their house to get him to sign, or, some whatever it may be, or just, girl fans that really wanted to spend their time and talk to Simon. I definitely had to block and tackle quite a bit, but not literally tackle, but sort of just the block and tackling. Mm-hmm. And, just to make sure that we could get what we needed to get accomplished at the event.
I mean, be honest, was it fun to do that? Was it fun to kind of like keep your eyes out and open at all times and like, ooh, where do I have to jump in and kind of handle the situation?
Oh, completely. I mean, that is so my wheelhouse. I'm an Army kid. My father was Army. So we got lots of training like an Army battalion as a child. And so I think I was in a former life, I was probably some sort of a gladiator or spy or 007 or something, because I really did enjoy it. To be able to, keep your eyes on the door and where is everything and, where's the exits? Who do I need in case of emergency? So on and so forth, all those kind of things. Where's the signal? I loved it.
It's funny because I always dreamed of being in the FBI. I was a big X-Files fan, so I always wanted to be in the FBI. And I always tell my wife if I wasn't an assistant, I'd probably be like, a cop or FBI or something.
I mean, hey, the skill set isn't, there are many skill sets that are not exactly the same, but what we do is really uncovering history, uncovering how you get something done. So I could totally see that. And that just sounds fun.
Right. So what was the biggest mistake you made as an assistant, and what did you learn from it?
I've certainly sent him to the wrong airport and done all of it, not had car services show up because I booked it for the wrong day, sort of all the things that all of us assistants go through on a daily basis and run into. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, communication was an issue for me. I realized, in year 2 or year 3 through this job that my communication was very one-sided, like my side, basically, not one-sided, my-sided. And when I was communicating with Simon, I was taking all of the emotion out of it. It was just task, task, task. It wasn't, I didn't feel like I was communicating with a human. I felt like I was communicating with a task or a taskmaster. And that was all my doing. And I just didn't pay the relationship enough attention to really work on my communication. So Simon and I, and this is a story that I've told before, we were in the Chicago airport after a very long week. We had done, I want to say it was 4 cities in 5 days, and we were just both plumb exhausted. I don't even know how we were standing upright at this moment. And I was feeling a nag that I had a lot of work that needed to be done that week, because while we were on the road and on the airplanes, I wasn't getting as much done. And I knew I had to get some information from Simon. And instead of actually observing the situation and understanding that both of us were exhausted, all I thought to myself was, I need to get this done. So I need to get this done in any means necessary. So I pull out my notebook and I start hounding him while we're in line. Question this. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? And he was just so exhausted. He looked at me with these just tired eyes and he just said, "Not now, Monique." And he didn't mean that in any sort of way. He just couldn't answer these questions right now. And I was in such a way that I did not take that comment well, and we just started to have a big old argument right in the middle of the TSA pre-check line in the Chicago O'Hare Airport, screaming at each other. And I mean, screaming at each other. It was very embarrassing. We had the security had to come over to us, the whole 9 yards. And we finally got through security to the other side, and I kept on barking because all I wanted to do was be right. I just wanted to be right. And I wanted to get my job done, and I wanted to prove it to him that I was worthy. And so when we finally did get to the other side and actually sat down and had a conversation, he explained, like, look, I'm just tired. That was really it. I wanted to show up for you, but I just couldn't. And that instance changed me in so many ways. It held up a mirror to the insecurities that I had, and it held up to a mirror to the ways that I was expressing these insecurities. So I did lots of work on my communication from that point forward and really listened to not only what they were saying, but spoke in a manner that other people could understand me. I realized how rigid I was, how I needed to work on my adaptability. There was just a lot that came out of that one seemingly small incident, but I still think we might be on the Chicago airport's do not fly list. So that was probably my biggest mistake that I had was that incident.
Let's talk a little bit about the opportunity to work on different types of projects. And I was, my previous boss was an author, so I was given the opportunity to work very closely with literary agents, publishers, editors, just very behind the scenes of a book. And I'd never even had any idea what goes on behind the scenes of writing a book or publishing a book. And so I kind of got to see, how the sausage was made. And what types of projects did you get to participate in that gave you insight and exposure to things you maybe never would have been able to see or learn from if you were not an assistant?
Sure. I mean, that answer is endless. So almost every project that I was involved in, I don't know if I would have that opportunity if I was working another job. I agree with you, working in the literary world, figuring out how a book is published. It's very interesting. It's got its own world up into itself. And so having that knowledge, under my belt is something that has definitely helped me in so many ways. So I loved book launches. We did lots of different events for book launches in different cities, and just how each city responded to the message, or how in each area, how they register for events. I mean, even just something as silly as that, where, some different cities you get people register right away, and sometimes they register for an event 2 days before the event's happening. So I had lots of different experiences, not only with the book launches, but Simon's events. I mean, his events were so varied for all kinds of different audiences. I think the few that stick out to me was, we had the immense pleasure of working with the military, our United States military, quite often, and international for that matter. And again, I'm a military kid, and I have nothing but respect and honor for what these soldiers do, and our sisters and brothers in the military. So working with both them as well as law enforcement and various organizations like that, I think that was the most rewarding of all of the types of events that I could do, and just how I could help that sector of people. I think that's something that I'll never forget. And I would never have access to the rank and leadership that I was able to talk to, through this event, directors and colonels and, people with lots and lots and lots of stars on their shoulders. I would have never had access to people like that had I not been in this organization. So I feel myself very lucky for that.
So I had a experience where my former boss was, in some circles, was, kind of, famous, if you will. And he was the chaplain to the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team. And I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, so I'm a huge Kansas City Royals fan. Baseball is my favorite sport. I'm just super diehard fan. And there was one time where the Royals were in town in St. Louis, and he was going to lead the chapel for the Cardinals and the Royals. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to come with me?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, I do." And he's like, "Now don't wear any Royals gear because we're going to Busch Stadium." But my point is, I was walking through literally the locker room of the Kansas City Royals, the team that I, since as old as I could remember, I rooted for, and I just had to be a professional. And so my point is, like, what's a situation like that where you were kind of maybe starstruck or just, in awe of the opportunity, whether it was a military event or whatever, where you just kind of had to put your fandom, if you will, aside and just be professional? Did you have any experiences like that?
Sure. Actually, funnily enough, we did some work with the Philadelphia Eagles for a brief period of time, and I'm a huge football fan, and I'm from Philadelphia. So that unto itself was, I definitely had to keep myself together as we were sitting in the lunchroom, and I'm staring at guys that I have their jersey. Like, I had this guy's jersey in my closet, and I'm looking at him and I'm watching him eat. I'm like, this is absolutely insane. Yeah. So there were definitely instances like that. I mean, we just got to meet so many amazing people throughout, I was with him almost a decade, a little over 8 years. And so the people that I got to meet, it was incomparable. I think if there was one standout for me, at one point, Simon was actually at TED, and he met Will Smith, and I am a huge Will Smith fan, not only because he's from Philadelphia, but I just really appreciate how he's navigated his way in the celebrity world for so long, with integrity and honor. And so I knew he was there, and he said, I might be able to meet up with Will Smith tonight. And I was biting my teeth. I was so jealous. And the next morning I woke up and I had a voicemail from Will Smith as Simon was standing right next to him, called me on his phone, and then handed the phone to Will Smith. And I still to this day have a voicemail from Will Smith saying, hey, hello, Philly friend, and just some funny things and just stuff like that. I could have never imagined anything like that would happen to me.
So part of the reason that happened to you and that I got to experience something like that with the Royals was because our executives were very understanding and empowering and letting us kind of see the behind the scenes and paid attention. So what would you tell an executive who maybe doesn't let their assistant kind of in on some of these fun experiences like those, or and is considerate and thinks about, your personal affection towards Will Smith and going to spend a few minutes to do something like that makes your day or makes your, decade. But then, they think, what, they're just to schedule meetings and grab me coffee. And, what would you tell an executive who has not done that yet? Or
Well, I mean, this is another soapbox of mine is having executives understand the benefit and the value of us executive assistants and what we have to offer. I think what I would tell an executive is point blank, you're missing the boat. You are currently the person who is getting in the way of increased productivity, increased efficiency, profits, resources, harmony in the workplace. Like, it is basically endless on what an assistant can do. And the person standing in the way of that usually is the executive. An assistant is someone who's innately involved in almost everything that an executive does, sometimes even personally involved in what an executive does. And you would think that would actually be the executive's greatest competitive advantage. You would think this would be someone who they would want by their side. An executive tends to sway towards a strategic focus, a big picture thinking, that in the clouds view, and they should be, that they need to be squarely in that position. Whereas an assistant focuses on detail, on activation, on the pathways through the forest, not over it. Both are important. None are better than the other. Neither side of it is better than the other. But to me, wouldn't it be advantageous to have someone by your side who sees what you don't see, who knows what you don't know, who can build what you don't know how to build? This person, when of course hired right and in the right spot, can literally help your business increase in ways that you would never even imagine. Give you time back in your day, give you more energy, and that's the place that executive assistants really want to be in a place that they can affect change.
So an executive is listening and they're convinced now. You just convince them to, get more out of their assistant, empower their assistant. So what's a tip that you would give to them to take that next step and to actually do that?
So, for the beginning, I always get this question, like, what can an assistant and an executive do together in order to push forward to becoming this really powerful strategic partnership? And my first suggestion is, again, communication. Talk about where you are at the moment. What is the vision of the future? Where does the executive want to go? Like, talk about it as if it is 2 years from now, as if it is 4 years from now. Where do you want to be? Where is this company going? And where is this person going as a human? And how does this relationship work? What are the benefits of it? Where are the areas that you struggle? Having these open conversations as one would with a partner, like an actual romantic partner, these conversations are so important. It needs to happen in order for the relationship to grow. Second, I would say for the executive specifically, try and offer not only the content to your assistant, what they need to do and when they need to do it by, but try to offer more context. Why did you ask for this task to be done? That is something that I think was a game changer for me in my relationship when I was working with Simon. Was getting the context behind the content really helped me not only perform the task in a better way, but potentially perform 10 other tasks that he didn't even know he needed. It's like if an executive tells an assistant, hey, will you go to the library and get a book out about Martin Luther King? Sure, an assistant could go get a book out about Martin Luther King. That's easy enough to do. But if an executive gives the context and says, listen, I'm about to write a blog or a book or an article or something about those in history that have commanded large followings, and I need to get a couple of books about that. Could you help me? Well, then the assistant could go to the library and get a book out about Martin Luther King, but also Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, and Hitler, because all of those people also commanded large followings of history. So that's a pretty, simple answer to that question, to what the difference between context and content is. But again, you can see how this would help an assistant not only perform the task, but go beyond just checking off that box, go beyond just performing the task at hand. Context is unbelievably important.
That's great. So if you could snap your fingers and instantly give all assistants more of something, what would it be?
That's a great question. I would give them, I'm going to cheat and give 2.
That's fine. You snapped your fingers. You can give
I snapped my fingers. I want another answer. First, again, just because of my struggles with value, I would probably say pride. I would hope to give more assistants a sense of pride in who they are and their skill set. And then part 2 of that is the voice. I've heard more times than not executive assistants being afraid to speak up, afraid to say something, even when they think it would be helpful, even when they think they have a better way of doing a project or a process. I've heard so many assistants say, but I was just scared to say something. I didn't want to have my boss, make fun of me or think I was stupid or raise my hand in that meeting or whatever it may be. I think once we can get our voice back and knowing that confrontation isn't always a dirty word, or just having having an experience with someone, a communication experience, I think things would change very quickly for us in our profession if we could find our voice.
So let's shift topics just a little bit and talk about something that I don't think people talk about much. But what would you say to an assistant who becomes romantically or sexually attracted to their executive?
Interesting. I've never had that question before. I like it. When you're working so closely with someone, it's not understandable, I would say, but you're working very closely with someone day in and day out. So, I think there's probably something behind this attraction is what I would say, especially if an executive is in a situation like they're married or they have kids and they have all the situation, or both sides are for that matter. I would probably want to help identify what's behind the attraction for the assistant. Is it something that they've been dealing with for a long time? Is it a part of their need? Maybe they lost a parent, maybe they have some sort of a need behind it. Maybe there's something that's actually pushing the attraction more so than just actually being attracted to this person. So I would probably work with both sides of it to see if there was any history, anything behind the attraction first, and then figure out how to move forward equitably so that both teams can feel comfortable working together in that environment, but also understanding sometimes it just wouldn't be a comfortable environment after that. So probably helping both of them solve the problem that they needed at hand, one to get another job and the other to fill a spot, to fill, the hole for the executive assistant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting, can be controversial topic. I've had mixed reviews when I've kind of brought this topic up in EA settings. I think the general thought that I would kind of add to that is when you spend, like you mentioned, when you spend so much time with someone, and an executive assistant usually sometimes spends more time with an executive than the executive might spend with their spouse.
Exactly.
And so there's just going to be a natural connection from spending time together with somebody.
Sure.
And so there's just certain, I think there are certain boundaries, and whether it's emotional, physical, social even, that you can put in place, particularly like you said, if both parties are married and or one of them's married and has kids. Like, I think there's just some mature character boundaries that you can put in place. Like maybe you don't go to happy hour one-on-one with your boss. That might be something that some people have to put into place.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a given. You need to avoid I want to say temptation. I'm not going to use that in a lighter sense than that word can be used, but you have to avoid all the temptation to want to grow that relationship in that manner. Avoid personal outings like that, avoiding, getting into a position where it could be compromised. I mean, not only your job, but somebody's future could be compromised.
Yeah. One of my buddies is always like, I still can't believe you've never been in a fight, like a physical fight. And I'm like, well, I fought with my brothers. He's like, no, like a real fight. I'm like, well, maybe because I'm smart enough to not put myself in situations where a fight might happen.
Right. Exactly.
So
I feel you there. Yes.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, if you are hiring an assistant, what would you look for? And maybe what's a question that you would ask in the interview? Sure.
So my perspective on this is slightly different than most. And what I encourage executives, and if I was ever going to hire an assistant, I would hire for values. This is so important that so many people do not do. They write a piece of paper with some words on it that say you need to be proficient in Google Drive and know how to use Slack. Well, it's more than that. It's values-based, especially this job where you're working so closely with somebody else and you need to make sure you guys are in lockstep. So I personally recommend, and I would only hire for values because skills can be taught. For example, if the executive is a family man or woman who's got kids and the husband or the wife or the partner or something, and they hire an executive assistant, let's say, who's single, has never had kids and has never grown up around kids. Now, there is better or worse, so I'm saying that out loud now. I'm not dinging on either side of the coin there. But when the executive would say, hey, I have to be out of here by 5 o'clock because I need to go to little Timmy's baseball game, that means something else. If you value family the way that your executive values family, that is something that they would go above and beyond to make sure that you got to little Timmy's baseball game, as opposed to someone who just doesn't have that human experience. So I take lots of time whenever I'm hiring someone. I get to know these people as humans. What makes you tick as a human? What do you value in the world? If integrity is not in your top 5 values, I'm probably not going to hire you, because that is one of my top 5 values. And then again, past that, skills can be taught. Whether or not you can load something up on Google Drive is something that can be taught. But having the same values as someone that you're working so closely with, I don't think is something that you can get through a resume. So I spend a lot of time. I take potential hirees out, sit down with them, have a meal with them, talk to them about their history. And it's not to be done, secretively, but I will ask questions that will reinforce or give me more information. So if I'm interviewing a potential candidate and I say, one of my biggest values is honesty, and they say, oh, me too. One of my biggest values is honesty. 10 questions down the line, I might say something to the effect of, how many times have you had to lie for your job? Isn't that funny? See what they come back with. Because if they say, oh, yeah, I used to lie all the time for my boss. Well, it's a data point. It's
Right.
incongruent with what that person said before. And that might not be I might not hire them because of that. But again, it's a data point. So once they say their values, then I ask for, reinforcing stories. Show me how your value did show up in your last job, or how didn't it? When were you inconsistent with your values, and what did you do to correct that? Those sorts of things.
I love it. I not to bring it back to baseball, but I will bring it back to baseball. So the Royals were terrible my whole life, and then 2014 they finally made the playoffs, made the World Series, made it to Game 7, almost won. Then 2015 they ended up winning, and they interviewed the general manager Dayton Moore about how it took him like 10 years to get the team to the playoffs. And they interviewed him about how did he choose players back, 10 years prior. And he said that he looked for two things: one, athleticism, and two, character. And he said that those were the two things. I would not draft for somebody. I would not trade for somebody unless they were athletic, and especially the young, like farm system, unless they were athletic and had good character. And he said,
Sure.
you can teach the skills.
Absolutely.
And so that's what they did. They got these guys that were super fast, super athletic, and it took 10 years, and they had good character, so you didn't have all these crazy stories in the media about such and such player did this and this, and anyway, so
it's so underutilized, and it's so unbelievably important. We have all had experiences in our jobs where you work with someone who is really good at the job and a very bad human. We have all had experiences with that one person who makes people's lives miserable, or is the, that sales guy that people talk about, or that whatever guy, HR person, or whatever it may be. So, when you think about that, and we've all had experiences about that, what could one do in order to step over that? Well, talk about your values. What kind of a human are you? And then for the executive, reinforcing the values throughout and publicly to the staff is something that I highly encourage. So if the executive says, well, I value integrity and honesty, and then the person that gets promoted and gets the corner office is the person that lies and never does what they say they're going to do, well, that's incongruent. And what you're showing your team is that you're going to say you value these things, but what you actually are valuing is the production out of that person, is the money that they make, is the value that they add, is the sales that they got, whatever. So, I highly encourage our executives to, feed the good wolf and promote the things that you want to see in your team, and instead promote the person who maybe didn't make the goal, maybe didn't make that sales number, maybe didn't make that, whatever it may be, but who perform in a manner that is congruent with the values of the association. Because that's, you're going to get what you're going to get what you promote, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about your next phase in life. So when did you kind of know it was time to move on from your role? You said you usually are at companies or at certain roles for quite a while. When did you decide it was time to move on? And tell us about what's next.
Sure. Well, I know myself. I'm self-aware enough to know that I am wonderful in the building. I'm great at building an idea and making it into a reality, and taking a concept and making it something. I've always been able to do that. Where I do lack the enthusiasm is for when things are sort of stasis, when things are just maintaining and there's nothing to build or grow or develop. And we were in a point at the company where we were sort of leveling out and going into a bit of a stasis mode, and Simon wasn't traveling as much. And I knew that my gifts and my talents were more than that. And I wanted to get back to building and growing something. So I just left at the end of January and started my own company where I'm helping other people build and grow their dreams. And so I'm now doing the same thing, but I'm just doing it for more people. So my company, it's called On Point, And basically, I'm helping solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small businesses, those that have a vision, those that have such a clear vision in their head that they can taste it, but what they don't know how to do is build it. Because that's, in a small business, sometimes there's only 2 or 3 people who are running the entire organization, and they have to be chef, cook, and bottle washer. But what if you don't know how to be a bottle washer? What if that's not your strength set to be a bottle washer? What if you really just know how to be the chef or the cook? So I'm helping small businesses actually build their dreams, build their empires, but in the capacity of the actual build, not the strategy. So it's slightly different than some other folks.
That's great. So any tips for assistants who feel like it's time for a change? Maybe they want to start their own deal like you're doing, or maybe they just need to move on to a different executive?
You have being self-aware and really asking yourself the tough questions and knowing that any decision that you make is for you and your life and the good of your life. And as long as you're staying with your values as who you are as a human, and knowing that there is just some sort of inconsistency. We all know when there's an inconsistency. We all know when our gut tells us something. It's just a matter if you want to listen to it or not. So listen to it is, I think, my first suggestion. And then figure out why. Why are you having these feelings? What is it about the company that makes you want to leave? This is helpful for a few reasons. A, you know what to look for in the future. If you're being abused, if you're not being heard, if you're, if you happen to be in that role where you're being treated as second best. If that's the reason that you're leaving, make sure you know that, and make sure that when you're on your next interview, that you bring it up. In my last role, I was really not heard, and I have plenty of good ideas, and I definitely helped the company in this way, that way, and this way. And I want to be in a role in which I can affect change. I want to be in a role where I can actually make something happen. And that's very important to me. So, that can help you in future interviews. But getting to the heart of why you want to leave, really listening to that gut. What is it? What is it about this current organization that is making me want to go somewhere else, and identify that and know that there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong if you do want to leave. There's nothing wrong with it if you need to find another job for whatever reason it may be to make you happy. At the end of the day, if you're not happy, you're not performing at your optimal best, and your executive is not getting the optimal best out of you. So it may actually be a good thing in order to move on and let somebody else take that role where they can help their executive in better ways.
Yeah. Last question. What makes an assistant a leader? Wow.
I think most assistants already are leaders, whether they say that they are or not, or whether they think they are or not. I had the advantage of learning from the foremost leadership experts. So you'll probably have heard this before when I say, a leader is not someone who's at the top of an organization. A leader is someone who chooses to take care of the person at the left of them, the person at the right of them. A leader is someone who takes care of all those around them, regardless of how the executive is showing up, or the sales guy is showing up, or how the teacher showed up that morning, or anybody else. A leader is someone who just is there to take care of everyone else. And so I've met plenty of people at the top of organizations who are not leaders. They have authority, but they are not leaders over us. And I have met even more people at the bottom of organizations who absolutely are leaders, because they've made the decision to take care of those around them. And so I think the more you can concentrate on that, again, regardless of how your executive is showing up, if you're there helping your fellow team members, your fellow tribe members, helping those around you, I think that's what makes the biggest leaders.
Love it. I like how you said that you're a leader, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Because we are, we all have influence.
We are.
Just what do we do
Absolutely.
with it?
And people look up to us to know what's right, what's wrong, how they're supposed to act. People look up to the executive assistant a lot, more than is ever talked about. And I think the role of an executive assistant to show that leadership capacity, even though they may not have a C in their title, or whatever version of the title makes them, at their optimal best. I think, we're leaders whether we want to be or not, and we should act as such. And we should continue to try and take care of those around us and help our fellow executive assistants rise. this tribe, this community that we have. Unfortunately, we tend to come from a place of, I can do it all. We're self-sufficient, most of us EAs, and I can do everything. Well, maybe you can, but you also have a tribe of people around you that are there to lift you up and help you up and, dust off your knee if you fall down, and vice versa, for you to be there for somebody else to support and help. Unfortunately, we live in a pretty divided world these days where it's a selfish type of community. It's divided and selfish, and what I need. So the more we can share and the more that we can help our people around us, I think it's not only going to make our organizations better, but hopefully make the world better.
Awesome. Well, where can we find you online, and how can people support what you're doing?
Sure. My business website is onpoint.expert. Apparently all the .coms are taken, so they have a new handle now, .expert, which I'm a big fan of. Nice. So onpoint.expert. And then if you're interested in hearing me speak, or interested in hiring me to speak at your event, you can just go to MoniqueHelstrom.com. My full name, MoniqueHelstrom.com. Both of those are available.
Perfect. Well, I'll put those on the show notes so that everybody can find you easily. Thanks again for joining the Leader Assistant podcast, and I'm very excited to get this thing published, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thanks to everyone listening.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Check out today's show notes on leaderassistant.com/16. Also, join our Facebook community at facebook.leaderassistant.com. Talk to you next time.
Help my dad out and leave a review on iTunes. GoBulls.com